Nikola Tesla standing there with this old farmer, where he's running his whole farm on this device where he has stakes in the ground that are tapping into this electromagnetic and mostly magnetic flux field and running generators running his farm.
Most people hear Tesla and think cars, coils, and bright bolts of electricity. But one of Nikola Tesla's strangest patents was never really about running wires or spinning motors.
Tesla and electricity. What did you think about Tesla's initial idea?
AI just pulled that patent out of the archive and treated it like the odd one out. A piece of tech aimed at something much closer to us than power grids. Once you see what it points to, you cannot unsee it. Tesla's strange patent. In the early 1900s, Nikola Tesla's world shifted. The big power wars were over. New radio companies and new inventors were taking the spotlight. Tesla was living in New York hotels, filing patents that looked stranger every year. He talked about wireless power, cosmic rays, and devices that could pull energy out of the air.
I was sure that I could accumulate the energy extracted from the air anywhere in the world and use that energy in any kind of form.
Reporters still printed his claims, but many experts began to see him as a once great engineer who had drifted into dreams. One of the clearest examples of this late period is a small patent with a simple drawing. It is called Apparatus for the Utilization of Radiant Energy. Tesla filed it in 1901, and it was granted that same year. On the page, it looks plain. There is a metal plate, a wire, a box, and a connection to the Earth. The idea is easy to follow. A smooth metal plate is lifted high above the ground and held away from anything else. A wire runs from that plate down into one side of a box. Inside the box sits what Tesla calls a condenser. Today, we would say capacitor, which is just an electrical storage tank. The other side of that tank connects to the Earth through a buried plate or pipe. Between the tank and the device you want to run, Tesla places a simple switch. In the patent text, he explains what he expects that setup to do.
In the center of my lab, I built this massive transformer. One end of its primary winding was grounded.
High-energy rays from the sun and other sources hit the raised plate. These rays include invisible light, such as ultraviolet and X-rays, along with what he simply calls radiant energy. When they strike the metal, they knock tiny charged particles loose. Over time, those particles collect as electric charge in the storage tank. When you close the switch, that stored charge flows into a small lamp or motor, does a little work, and then the tank has to fill up again. Seen with modern eyes, this is an early form of energy harvesting. You are not burning fuel or running a waterfall. You are letting the sky slowly drip electricity into a bucket and using it when it is full. Instruments that measure radiation and the electric field in the air still use similar principles. The hard limit comes from the amount of energy that actually reaches the plate.
This device was able to store energy and produce a lightning-like current of several million volts.
The usable particle energy that reaches each square foot of plate at ground level is very small. Measurements of cosmic rays and related particles show that the power they deliver is tiny compared to what even a simple household device needs. Even if you raise a large plate high in the air, the incoming energy is still spread thin over that whole area. You might get enough to run a very sensitive instrument, but not enough to drive a serious motor or light a home. Engineers who checked the figures came to the same conclusion. As a power source for factories or cities, this patent is a dead end. The energy trickles in too slowly. It is like trying to fill a swimming pool with drops of dew. Yet the patent keeps drawing attention. Part of the pull is its simplicity. Anyone can sketch the circuit and imagine what it would be like if it worked on a grand scale. Another part is the language Tesla uses. He does not talk only about electricity and wires. He talks about radiant energy, a broad term he used for sunlight, heat, X-rays, and new kinds of rays that early scientists were still exploring.
Transmitted wirelessly by using the Earth's natural conductivity.
The little box in the drawing is his way of catching a tiny slice of that wider storm. This links into the way Tesla thought about energy in general. In his essay, The Problem of Increasing Human Energy, he describes the sun as the great engine driving life on Earth. He writes about finding better methods to capture that flow. from improved engines to new ways of turning sunshine and heat into useful work.
Tesla and his discoveries have proven to be more prophetic and accurate than they were ever thought to be during his lifetime.
When Tesla built his giant coils, he saw bright arcs, heard sharp cracks, and watched glass tubes glow without wires. For him, light, heat, and electrical sparks were all faces of the same deep thing, energy moving in different ways. He believed that if you could learn to tune and direct that movement, you could light cities and run machines without wasting fuel. The radiant energy patent is a small, focused try at that, not on a city scale, but at the level of a single plate and a single storage box. Around the same years, Tesla was also thinking about how machines might move differently. In his final United States patent, granted on January 3, 1928, he set out a design he called an apparatus for aerial transportation. It was a compact flying machine, a kind of blend between a helicopter and an airplane. The craft was meant to rise straight up and then tilt forward to fly normally, using the same propellers for both moves. Taken together, these late patents show an older Tesla still pushing after new paths. His great success with motors and big power plants came decades earlier. He had already tried to build a worldwide wireless system at Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, hoping to send messages and maybe power without wires. Those plans collapsed when funding dried up, and the tower was left unfinished. But he did not stop filing ideas that tried to link the ground, the air, and our machines in new ways.
With regards to everything from the wireless distribution of electricity and telecommunications.
This is the kind of scattered legacy that modern artificial intelligence is good at sorting through. Today, patent offices and tech companies use AI systems to search huge databases of patents. Instead of one person reading page after page, a model can scan titles, summaries, claims, and even images, and group together documents that talk about similar things. In that kind of search, Tesla's work spreads into several clusters. His radiant energy patent ends up near other ideas about high-frequency electricity, atmospheric electricity, early solar devices, and odd sensors that reach into the air. His aircraft patent falls into a different group, beside early helicopter designs, tilt-wing craft, and new control systems for flight. The AI does not decide which ideas are right or wrong. What it does is highlight links that human readers often miss because we focus on the same famous stories. Seen through that lens, the radiant energy box stops looking like a failed plan to power the world. Instead, it looks like one link between different stages of Tesla's thinking. First, he helped reshape how we generate power on the ground. Then he tried to send that power and information without wires.
I wanted to know whether this technology could transmit energy wirelessly over long distances using the ground as a transmitter.
Finally, in this quiet patent, he drew a box that sits between the earth and the sky and slowly takes in whatever energy falls on it. A modern AI system marks that as unusual and worth a closer look. Why would a man who once dealt in huge dynamos and waterfalls spend time on a device that pulls in only a tiny trickle of charge? The most likely answer is simple. He was curious. He wanted to test every doorway that might lead to a new kind of energy, no matter how narrow it seemed. But that little box wasn't the only strange place his mind went. When a deadly flu hit his city, Tesla started pointing his love of energy and frequency at something much closer to home: disease. Tesla's healing experiments. When the Great War was finally easing, another disaster hit. A fast-moving flu began in army camps and ports, crossed the oceans and circled the globe. Doctors later called it the Spanish flu. Modern studies say it killed at least 50 million people worldwide, more than the soldiers who died in battle. Hospitals overflowed, and whole communities went into mourning. New York City was one of the hardest hit. The city was crowded, with families packed into small apartments and people pressed together in trains and streetcars. Health records show that the flu killed around 30,000 New Yorkers in a short time. Nikola Tesla was living right in the middle of that city. He was a middle-aged man in New York hotels, short of money, trying to protect his ideas and his health. He read newspapers closely and followed reports as the disease moved. For a man who already hated the idea of invisible germs, the pandemic sank straight into his deepest fears. Long before that flu, people who met Tesla noticed how tense he was about dirt and disease. Friends and waiters said he disliked shaking hands and often pulled back if someone tried to touch him. In New York restaurants, he insisted on spotless metalware and asked for stacks of clean napkins at every meal. One well-known story says he liked to have 18 napkins on the table and use them in a fixed order to wipe each glass and fork. If the service did not meet his standard, he would simply walk out. His fear of contamination shaped the rest of his routine. Tesla chose his hotel rooms with care. He liked rooms whose sizes and numbers felt right to him, often built around the number 3.
This is unbelievable. Wow.
How many years did he spend in this room?
Some accounts say he even worked out the air volume of a room in his head and worried about how clean that air was. In later years, he boiled much of his food and water and washed his hands again and again. People around him saw a man who could not relax around germs or dust. This fear of sickness sat on top of something else he had been doing for years. Tesla had been putting high-frequency electrical currents through his own body since the 1890s. In his public lectures, he would step onto a stage, turn on a high-frequency generator, and let purple sparks dance over his skin while he held glowing bulbs in his hands. The current was very fast and low in strength, so it did not stop his heart the way ordinary shocks could. Instead, it made his skin tingle and warmed his tissues. At that time, doctors and inventors were excited about the idea of using electricity and light as medicine. Some uses were real and helpful. Others were pure sales talk. Tesla stood in the middle of that wave. He built early X-ray tubes and used them to photograph bones and metal objects. And he warned that too much exposure could burn the skin and damage the eyes. He also experimented with machines that made ozone, a sharp-smelling form of oxygen, and with shortwave light now called ultraviolet, a kind of invisible light that can kill some germs on surfaces and in the air. None of this made him a medical doctor, but by the time the Spanish flu hit, Tesla already thought of electricity, light, and vibration as tools that might affect living tissue, not just motors and lamps. If invisible waves could light a bulb without a wire, he wondered, could they also push back against invisible germs floating in the air or hiding in a person's lungs? Out of that same culture came one of the strangest gadgets of the early 20th century, the violet ray machine. These devices usually had a small box that plugged into the wall, a handle, and glass tubes. When you turned the knob, a high-frequency current ran through the tube, made the thin gas inside glow violet, and sent a buzzing sensation into the skin. Makers claimed that this purple spark could help almost anything. Ads said it was good for acne, hair loss, stiff joints, nervous problems, and even serious infections. Some ads and later collectors linked the idea back to Tesla's high-frequency work because his coil experiments had inspired the basic setup. People bought violet ray sets and kept them in their homes. Museums today still have boxed kits with attachments and printed manuals full of cure lists. Looking back, health historians and regulators classify these devices as quack medicine. Later on, in the 1940s and 1950s, the United States government and the Food and Drug Administration brought cases against violet ray makers for misbranding and false medical claims. Many devices were seized or destroyed. The machines could cause tingling and sometimes small burns, but there was no solid proof that they cured deep infections or cancer. While violet rays were being sold as cure-alls, another inventor on the West Coast was taking the frequency fights disease idea much further. His name was Royal Raymond Rife. Working in California in the 1920s and 1930s, Rife built unusual optical microscopes. He claimed that his best models could show living microbes at magnifications far beyond what normal lenses allowed. Some doctors and writers of the time were impressed by the images and movies he produced. Others were skeptical and pointed out that later tests could not match those results. From these microscope studies, Rife moved to a bold claim. He said that every germ had its own special mortal oscillatory rate, which in simple words meant a kill frequency. If you bathed the microbe in a radio-like signal at just the right pitch, he said, the microbe would start to shake, weaken, and break apart, while nearby healthy cells would be left alone. Rife built an electrical device he called a beam ray machine, and said that it could weaken or destroy disease organisms inside the body with these tuned waves. Supporters later told dramatic stories. They spoke of patients who were supposedly cured after a series of beam ray sessions and blamed powerful medical groups for shutting Rife down. But when you look for solid proof, the picture changes. There are no large, careful clinical trials from that time that confirm a cure. Modern reviews by cancer organizations and medical journals say that Rife machines have never been shown to treat cancer or infections reliably, and health agencies warn that people have been harmed when they stopped proven treatments to use them. So where does Tesla fit into this? In the real historical record, there is no sign that Tesla and Rife ever worked together or even met. The link between them comes from ideas. Both men were drawn to frequency, resonance, and the thought that the right kind of vibration might be able to change living tissue. Put all of this together, and you see a clear line, from germs to people to the air around them. The next place Tesla tried to push his frequency dreams was not inside the body at all, but up into the sky. Tesla and the sky. For Nikola Tesla, resonance was a simple idea. The planet behaves a bit like a bell. If you push it at the right rhythm, it will ring. To test that, he left New York and went to Colorado Springs at the end of the 1800s, where he built one of the strangest labs anyone had seen. On a hill outside town, he put up a wooden building with a very tall mast and a metal ball on top, roughly 200 feet high. Inside, he set up huge Tesla coils that threw long purple flashes of electricity across the room. In 1899, he used that setup to see how strong high-frequency currents moved through the ground and through the air. Reports from the time say he lit ordinary lamps at distances of many miles with no wires, by driving sharp pulses into the earth from his coil and mast. In his notes from Colorado Springs, he wrote that the earth and the air above it like parts of one big electrical system with a natural rhythm, or resonant frequency. Decades later, physicists measured slow natural pulses in the atmosphere, now called Schumann resonances, which really do act like a kind of background ringing between the ground and a charged layer high overhead. Tesla did not get the modern numbers right, but he was already thinking of the planet as something that could vibrate as a whole. From there, his dream got bigger. If the planet had a natural rhythm, he thought, you could build devices that match that rhythm and then use the whole world as the wire. When he came back east, he tried to turn that vision into a real project at a place called Wardenclyffe on Long Island. With money from banker J.P. Morgan, he began building a red brick laboratory and a wooden tower more than 150 feet tall, topped by a large steel dome. In public, he called it a wireless communication system for sending messages across the ocean. In private, he hoped it would be the first node in a worldwide network that could send both signals and power through the ground and the air. The project fell apart for very normal reasons. The cost of building went up, the financial climate changed, and Morgan refused to give more money. By the middle of the first decade of the 1900s, work at Wardenclyffe had stopped, and a few years later the empty tower was torn down and sold for scrap. But the picture of Tesla standing under that huge tower never went away. Tesla spoke and wrote that the sky might someday be something engineers could influence. In later interviews, he suggested that controlling electrical conditions in the upper air might allow people to change rainfall or reduce drought in certain regions. He also boasted that in one laboratory test he had created such a thick man-made fog that he could not see his hand in front of his face. To him, that was a small hint that electrical energy could be used to nudge air and moisture, not just wires and lamps. To understand why that idea keeps coming back, it helps to know about what scientists now call the ionosphere. This is a thin, electrically charged layer of air very high above us, starting tens of miles up. The sun's rays knock electrons off gas atoms there and turn that region into a weak plasma, which simply means the gas carries free charge. That layer helps radio waves bounce around the curve of the Earth, which is why shortwave radio can reach across oceans. Tesla did not know the ionosphere by name, but from his measurements, he pictured the Earth and its outer envelope of air as two plates of a giant electrical condenser, charged ground below, charged sky above. In the 20th century, other scientists and engineers actually built tools to study parts of that picture. One of the most famous sites is HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program near Gakona in Alaska. It is a field of metal towers and antennas covering a few dozen acres. At its center is a high-power radio transmitter that can send focused high-frequency waves up into a small patch of the ionosphere. The goal is to see how that charged layer responds, how radio waves travel through it, and how disturbances from the sun affect communication and navigation systems. Because HAARP really can warm a tiny spot in the ionosphere and sometimes make a faint artificial glow, it has become a magnet for wild claims. For years, people have blamed it for earthquakes, hurricanes, crop failures, and even mind control. Those stories do not match basic energy numbers. The power HAARP can send into the sky is tiny compared with the energy the sun constantly pours into the same layer, and the heated patch itself is only a few miles across. Independent researchers who work with the facility and the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which now runs it, describe it as an outdoor physics lab, not a steering wheel for global weather. A similar pattern shows up when people talk about the Great Pyramid of Giza. Archaeologists and Egyptologists treat it as a royal tomb for the pharaoh Khufu, built more than 4,000 years ago as part of a large funeral complex with temples, boat pits, and smaller pyramids for queens and relatives. Inside, it has 3 main chambers, passages, and a granite sarcophagus, much like a far larger and more elaborate version of other Old Kingdom royal tombs. Stone inscriptions, quarry marks, and even an ancient logbook from a crew that shipped limestone blocks all point to a huge but normal state project meant to build a burial place for a king. A different group of writers sees something else when they look at the same stone. Authors such as engineer Christopher Dunn have argued that the Great Pyramid is really a kind of ancient machine or power plant. They point to the smooth white limestone casing the pyramid once had and call it an outer insulator. They mention the granite rooms inside, which contain quartz crystals, and the missing capstone, which they picture as a metal top that may have acted like an antenna. In that picture, the whole pyramid is a resonant device tuned to the Earth's vibrations and able to pull in or shape energy. Most archaeologists and physicists do not accept this idea because there is no clear physical evidence of power outputs, wiring, or machines from that time. Once you mix Tesla into this pyramid story, it spreads even faster. He loved tall, resonant structures. The pyramid is tall, geometric, and built from materials that can conduct or insulate. These are long-distance comparisons drawn many years after both Tesla and Khufu's builders were gone. There is no sign in Tesla's surviving notebooks that he secretly decoded the pyramid's purpose. And there is no sign in ancient Egyptian records that the builders cared about Earth resonance in the way he did. The link mainly lives in modern imagination. Today, artificial intelligence systems sit on top of this entire pile of documents, patents, scientific papers, and conspiracy posts and start looking for patterns. Large language models are built to scan through huge amounts of text and find words and ideas that often appear together. If you feed one of these models material about Tesla's resonance dreams, ionospheric physics, HAARP experiments, and fringe books about pyramid power and weather weapons, the same terms keep popping up: resonance, antenna, ionosphere, pyramid, weather, and global circuit. To the model, those repeated words look like pieces of one big story. The problem is that these systems do not have common sense. They do not really know which patterns are careful science, which are loose guesses, and which are pure storytelling. Studies on AI hallucination show that language models often mix fact and fiction and still sound very sure of themselves. A model can see that Tesla wanted to use the Earth as a conductor, that modern labs really do heat small patches of the ionosphere, and that some authors claim the Great Pyramid was tuned to the planet. Then it is tempted to blend all of that into one neat tale where a single resonant idea runs from ancient Egypt through Tesla, all the way to secret projects in the present. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.